welcome to the Sugar and Spikes podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and anyone ready to uplevel their career in their own damn way. I'm Des. I'm a life coach for women who get that having it all sometimes means having to balance the good and the bad, the sugar and the spikes, and all the in-between.
And I'm Tammy. I'm a therapist, and I'm all about helping as many people as possible to build awareness and make meaningful changes in their lives. I'm also dedicated to diversity and inclusion and increasing access to mental health care.
Between the two of us, we have 4 master's degrees and thousands of hours helping people develop balance, confidence, and clarity on their terms. So let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast. I'm Des.
And I'm Tammy.
And today we are picking up with our entrepreneurship and mental health kind of series. I don't want to call it a series because we talked about depression, and then there was that branding episode because life happened.
Oh my gosh, it sure did.
And now we're doing this, and I can say for sure that the episode after this one is not going to be purely mental health. It is a very special episode with a very special guest.
Yes.
They're definitely not going to want to miss. But then after that, we're going to continue talking about mental health. So
it's a loose series.
It's
every
a theme.
other time.
Now, if we had our shit together, it would have been this on Tuesdays or Fridays and then the other stuff. But I mean,
Well, it's a process. We're doing the best we can.
Growth. We try. We try. We show up. We do the things. And that's one thing. I think a lot of people get caught up in this idea of like perfection and like having to follow all of these rules. And I can say like the rules are just, they're made up by somebody else that's making them up, that's making it up as they go. Like,
yeah. Or it's just a myth.
Yeah.
It's like a cultural myth.
Mm-hmm.
We all have it. We have this idea that we have to be X way. Like, we have to be the best and the brightest and the most beautiful and the thinnest and all the other things.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so much more diversity than that.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is I was doing an interview for Healthy Way, actually, and I said, there's a reason why the memes about like adulting and stuff get as much traction as they do.
Yeah.
Because we all feel like we're making it up.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say one of the things that comes along with the idea of making it up is freaking out about it and not knowing how to handle it and anxiety around it. And I think especially as entrepreneurs and stuff where we are blazing our own trails and have no idea what's coming down the pipeline, anxiety is really real.
Well, yeah, because the core of anxiety is uncertainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's really at the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what the future is. We worry about it. We are scared of it.
Mm-hmm.
We worry about how we'll cope with it. Like, it's just all this uncertainty just compounds and makes us super anxious. And if you think about the whole idea behind entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurial spirit, it really is about uncertainty and not knowing. So naturally, you're going to have to figure out how to cope with anxiety.
I feel like it's a double-edged sword. Like people that are drawn to the entrepreneur lifestyle are likely very much drawn to the I create my own fate, I create my own destiny. And people who are drawn to the entrepreneur lifestyle are also can be very type A, can be very like perfectionistic almost and planning and stuff. So then when like those two pieces collide, that's when you get anxiety.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, when you think about what you kind of give up to be an entrepreneur, right? You give up that consistency, you give up stability, you give up regular paycheck, you embrace fluctuation, you embrace risk taking that you need to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how could you not have anxiety about that?
Yeah. Well, and I think for a lot of people, the idea of like a stable paycheck is still very much reality because a lot of folks work for like larger corporations and everything. But I will say that the idea of a steady paycheck is also not as not as stable as we like to think it is.
Well, I really find it interesting that we think of that as safe, I say in quotes.
Yeah.
That's what our parents teach us. Like, go get the 9 to 5, get a steady paycheck. But really, like, I remember talking to my husband about this many, many years ago. And he said something to me that has always stuck with me about that. He's like, it's not certain.
Yeah.
People can be fired. People can be laid off. The company can downsize. The company can go bankrupt. So we think of it as a quote unquote safe choice. But really, there's no safety in it, really.
Yeah.
And for me, it kind of helped me to think about that in a whole new way. Like, oh, you're right. I kind of wonder why we think about it. Was kind of this whole idea of like my perspective just changed.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a super meaningful and really like astute observation to be able to say, you know what, that's really not as sure as we all like to think it is.
Yeah. And like for folks listening in the States, one thing that I've come to realize more so like very recently is majority of states are employment at will states, which everyone's like, oh, if they fire me, I'm going to go after them for like wrongful termination and stuff like that. That's very hard.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. And if it's an employment at will state, then you can be fired at any point for any time. Not to like initiate more anxiety into folks.
We're not doing a good job here.
But the thing is like really the idea is being able to manage your ambiguity, right? Like
that is life. It's life.
So as entrepreneurs, like it may feel more stressful. I feel like maybe because it's a little more apparent.
Well, and all the pressure's on us, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no one else. You can't say, oh, the company downsized. You may or may not have had a hand in that. I mean, you may have no control over that at all. But I think with entrepreneurship, we have this idea that we need to push ourselves as hard as we can. We can't make mistakes. And, you know, we can sleep when we're dead.
Yeah.
And that, you know, it's all on us. So there is more pressure that comes with that.
There's more pressure. And I mean, flip side to it, right? Like there's more freedom. Like if the company's downsizing, you don't have a say if your job is gone. And that was one thing, like, I've realized more so in the past year than any other point in my life that I was made to be an entrepreneur because from as early as I can remember, I wanted to be a psychologist because I didn't want a boss, because I didn't want the rules. And in my mind, I thought like being a doctor means no rules. I didn't want the rules, and I didn't want anybody to be able to fire me.
Okay.
And that was why I wanted to be a psychologist. And I didn't grow up in a world like my little Southern California bubble. I didn't see small business owners. I didn't see entrepreneurs. I didn't see that stuff. What I did see was private practice psychologists. I saw private practice medical professionals
who are entrepreneurs in their own right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a niche for sure, a niche, whatever.
And so when I got to grad school and I realized that I could do that thing without, like, I don't want to say without the oversight and regulation, but let's be honest, I decided to drop out during ethics.
Why?
Like, what was my point?
It's one of those days.
It's gone.
We're not striving for perfection.
What was I going to say? Entrepreneur. You have control. I wanted to be in control of my own damn destiny.
Okay.
And that's like, there's privilege in that. And it's stressful and it's scary and it's ugly sometimes. Like it can feel very ugly and uncertain. And if I'm going to trust anyone with my fucking life, it's going to be me.
Right, exactly.
I'm not going to trust Joe in HR down the street, like, or down the hall. Like,
well, there's risk and reward with it, right? Big risk, big reward. Like, it does come with freedom, but it comes with more pressure. Or it can, anyway. Yeah. I mean, I mean, it doesn't help that like a lot of entrepreneurs are super type A too, right? Because that just feeds into kind of that whole anxiety, need to be perfect, can't make mistakes. And if we do make mistakes, we just beat ourselves up like crazy.
Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Why did I do that?
Oh, that was so stupid.
They're just going to think X, Y, and Z. Like, oh, man.
Oh, like, why did I spend money on that? You know what I mean? Like, and you just beat yourself up. And it's, so I think maybe part of the battle is teaching some self-compassion, which we have talked about before. And I think it fits in really nicely here in this kind of entrepreneurial world.
Yeah.
Like this idea of saying, you know, failure is almost inevitable.
Yeah.
Right? Not in a, oh, my world is over kind of way, but oh, like things I do are not going to work the way I want them to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to be resilient, and I'm going to have to be able to bounce back, and I'm going to have to be able to make something of that. And, you know, it's just kind of part of being human. And so it's treating ourselves with understanding, with kindness, with respect to say like, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes. Well, what did I learn from that, and how can I adjust?
And I think the thing is like, it's all feedback, right?
Yeah.
Like we have this fear of what if it isn't everything we thought it was going to be? Well, what if it isn't? And then do we have information gained from that?
Well, and how often do our experiences really match up with the idea in our head? It could be better in some ways. It could be not what you thought in some ways.
Yeah.
It could be kind of what you thought, but you had no idea about this piece over here. And I think that happens more often than not, right? Like even something like having kids. Having kids has been nothing like how I imagined.
Right, yeah.
That doesn't make it a bad experience, but it just did not match what I had in my head because I had never lived it. So like one of the things that I think about is having experiences for the sake of having them.
Yeah.
Not for some outcome. Like you're an entrepreneur because you love to create and you're creative and you like to take risks and you like to put something out there. You like to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And so letting that process be what it is rather than like some end goal in mind. Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't.
It does. Like
you don't have kids to say, well, wash my hands when they're 18. I had kids. That was great. You have them to have the experience of it, right? To be a parent, to have that experience. Entrepreneurship's the same way.
Or I mean, to get a tax write-off.
Ouch. Now we know what Des really thinks. Oh my God. Just kidding. I knew you thought that.
The funny thing is I say that about kids and I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, but if you're creating all of this stuff, like the other piece that comes around anxiety is you're putting your heart and soul into it. Yeah. And it's not even the experience. It's not only the experience of, it's there's a piece of me out there now, and how's that? Like you're putting yourself on the line, and I don't care if you're making software. I don't care if you're doing design. I don't care what you're doing as an entrepreneur. You're still putting everything in you forward. Like I think about.
So it's more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think about every entrepreneur I've ever known, and it's been more of a passion project, and like logic comes into play sometimes, but not necessarily all the time. And I think that speaks to what we talked about earlier in terms of we're conditioned to believe that a corporate job is it. So then like you're already dealing with that logical piece of, well, I'm going to go do this where there's not policies and it doesn't feel certain and stuff like that. It's because of passion, and it's because of something that's a bit deeper. Whereas kids, it's just a fucking tax write-off. I'm going to get so much hate mail.
Oh my God, you
this.
are. But I actually think that like parenting and entrepreneurship have certain things in common that make them really good metaphors for each other. Because like you as a parent feel very vulnerable because you feel like children are a reflection of you in the same way that your work and creativity and passion are a reflection of who you are as a business owner. And so it has that kind of that quality of vulnerability of, oh my gosh, what are people thinking of me right now?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like, are they going to think I'm doing a good job, or how are they going to judge me? Right.
Yeah.
But part of that is us judging ourselves, but also anyway, that's just why I brought up parenting piece. Tax breaks or not.
I will say, before I started the business, I never really quite understood it's my baby. Like, I had a dog and I loved him and felt a love that I would have never known otherwise. So I understood that piece of, I don't want to equate it directly to parenting, but I understood like feeling like an unconditional love.
Yeah. For another being.
For another thing that's living. Yeah. But I've poured my heart and soul into you and bled for this and had sleepless nights over this, and now I'm putting it into the world. I never understood that.
Yeah.
Until my business happened, and then
like thinking about everything it represents, right?
Yeah. And then I was having a conversation. You know what? Fuck it. I was having a conversation with my former boss, and it came up so naturally. I was like, it's my baby. Like, I'm not just going to walk away from it.
Right.
And in that moment, I felt protective and maternal and just like more things than I think I'd ever felt, and willing to make illogical decisions.
Okay.
Like standing up in that moment and being like, I'm not shutting it down. Like, reasonably, there's no need to. And
so
if you ask
willing
me
to go with like your gut and your heart,
and just like making, like, walking into that dark room when the rest of the theater's like, don't walk in, don't do it. Hey guys, popping in for a quick question. Do you know your signature leadership style? It's kind of really important to know so you can figure out how you do the thing the best way you can. So, if you haven't already, head on over to DesireeW.com, click on Signature Leadership Style Quiz. It is the blue button, and find out. The quiz will tell you if you are a make-it-work mogul, a benevolent boss, a social savant, the ultimate head boss in charge, or if you are a true classic, well-informed and wise. Head on over to DesireeW.com, click Find Your Signature Leadership Style, and let me know what you get. And now we'll get back to the episode. So, yeah, like I get the similarities more so than I think I ever expected to.
Yeah. I mean, it may be kind of a weird thing to kind of draw a parallel between, but I like what you said. I think it does that in a really nice way that I don't think maybe I could have otherwise. But who knew that when people started listening to a podcast about anxiety, we'd be talking about how entrepreneurship and parenting are really similar.
I mean, like, parenting makes you anxious, I'd assume.
It does. Because you never know if you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Because there's no fucking manual.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting. But you don't know. And like, I have more than one kid, right? So what I do for this kid may not work for the other one. And so I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Should I have said that? Should I have let them do that? I don't know. Right. So it's like embracing that idea of we never know if we're doing the right thing, but also there can be many right things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point is we're so used to, and I think school, like elementary school does this. Like we're taught to proceed on a certain path, like a trajectory. And if you don't, like if you step out of line, you're making the wrong choice.
Yeah.
You know, whereas life is so much messier than that. And that's one thing that I feel like isn't always communicated. Like people are like, well, college and grad school, like it's stupid. Like why do you need that stuff anymore? And I'm just like sitting there like, the thing that I learned in grad school was how to critically think, like how to weigh the pros and cons, how to like manage my goddamn ambiguity. That's the one thing I got.
That's like our podcast arc. Manage your ambiguity.
Like those are things you don't learn elementary, junior high, high school.
Yeah.
Where it's the have a viewpoint, defend your viewpoint, then your viewpoint's right.
Yeah. And, you know, I like to kind of get away from right and wrong decisions. Yeah. You can make healthy and unhealthy decisions. You can make effective and less effective decisions. But this idea that there's like one right way and all other ways are somehow wrong, like that isn't true. Yeah. It's just they lead you down paths, and they could be unexpected. They could be amazing. They could be like, oh my God, why did I do that? And where am I right now? But you can then another kind of fork in the road, right? And it's not even a fork, because that just even assumes that like
there's only two.
There's only two, and there could be many. So we talk about out of the box and creative thinking.
Clearing the shrubs.
Yeah, like I don't want to go on these two. I want to go that way into the forest where there is no path, right? Yeah. And so figuring it out as you go. And that can be a quote unquote right decision.
So we've talked a bit about the idea of anxiety.
Yeah.
But one thing is I feel like for me, it's hard to realize that I'm anxious until it's painfully clear that it's anxiety.
What do you think it is? Like when it's happened, like when you look back, you're like, oh, I thought that was.
It's a mood. I'm grumpy. Okay. I have a feeling. Like, how many times have I texted you just been like, I have a feeling? So let's talk about some ways anxiety may show itself. Okay. To help bring awareness, because I feel like if you're plugging away at your day-to-day and trying to make shit happen as an entrepreneur, having the awareness around anxiety until it comes crashing down, can be hard.
Well, I mean, the thing is, anxiety is a little bit of a double-edged sword, because a little bit of it
is
good. It stimulates your performance. It makes you present your best self. It makes you work harder. It makes you achieve things.
Makes you step the fuck up.
Right? But there's a tipping point. So it's that inverted U. So there's a tipping point where too much, you're frozen, you're freaking out, your performance goes down. So I don't like the idea of saying you don't ever want to have anxiety, but where it starts to become an issue is where it's affecting your performance in a negative way, where it's impacting your life, it's impacting your relationships, it's impacting your ability to take care of yourself, it's impacting your relationships with your family, with your significant others. So like that's when people usually seek out and say like, oh my God, it is anxiety and I'm kind of freaking out right now, because the whole idea around like diagnosis of anxiety as like needing attention is that you worry and find it difficult to control the worry.
Yeah.
Right? So that idea of very difficult to control, you're very irritable, you have a lot of muscle tension, you might be fatigued because you're tense all the time, you feel keyed up, you feel like this impending sense that something bad is going to happen, and it's just getting in the way. It's no longer like boosting your performance, it's harming your performance.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like, so I think this idea that we don't recognize anxiety can be totally fine, because on some level it's good. It has a purpose and it's useful.
Yeah.
So like when you finally, it's kind of like being sick, like physically sick. Like maybe you don't notice how sick you are until you're super, super sick, but you think it's just stress or you're managing it okay until your body just crashes. So that's the idea, I think, behind what you're talking about with it, with like anxiety. Like you're like, oh my God, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, so one thing that I talk with clients about is the idea of like putting it in a box. Like if you're able to kind of keep it in a box, and that's when I go through like the 4 square breathing and like visualize like your breath as a force field controlling the anxiety. Like it's there, but you're also to like put it in a box and walk away from it. And then the concern or like okay, what are the next steps comes when it like just breaks out of the box and it becomes more than.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the treatments for anxiety kind of center around grounding and management. being mindful.
Yeah.
Not being so far out in the future that it's paralyzing.
Yeah. Which is really where it comes from, is
Right.
the what if, what if, what if, what if.
Right. So trying to kind of calm that down, doing techniques, activities that calm that down so that you're back in that area where it's stimulating and increasing your performance. So that's a lot of it. A lot of it too can be like, sorry. So, another thing I think you can see with anxiety is like procrastination. So they're often linked together because you're so anxious about it, you can't even get started on the project. So when you feel scared and overwhelmed, it's difficult to take action. And so breaking that down, and we've talked about this before, like, I can't commit to that thing.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so what can you commit to? What can I reasonably do right now that can help move me forward, even if it's something super small? Can help to kind of, because then that gives you a sense of accomplishment and you're like, okay, I can do this. So that in itself too is about calming down the anxiety and getting it back into that zone where it's helping you.
Yeah.
Did I get off track?
No, I think that's really good. A really good point.
Yeah.
And a really good perspective. So on that, like on that note, a few like easy ways to control it, like easy ways to kind of handle it, like is it like you mentioned, like it's around the grounding piece, but also I've lost it.
So a few techniques. So some strategies to manage anxiety.
Yeah.
Is that what you want to know about?
That.
Okay. Well, mindfulness is really good. And I think a lot of people think about mindfulness as like a sit and and that's not what I mean at all. That if that works for you, then please make that a part of your daily practice. But it could be looking out the window and like finding all the blue things that you can see. It could be naming all the things you see in your office. It could be counting all the John Wayne movies you know. I don't know, something like it, just
to like bring you back in. One thing that I've started to do, because I've been in a situation where I have been feeling very anxious recently, is checking in with myself. And I feel like this may be more of like a quote unquote advanced technique because I have the awareness around it, but like checking in with myself of like what's going on right now, and then having a thought and being like, is that a true thought, or is that an assumption, or is that like a lie? Like, is that something that I'm just like
checking the facts?
Yeah, totally checking the facts. And then once I like have kind of an understanding, like I'll hit like 4 or 5, and then around there I kind of feel more in the moment and more present. And then it's like, and what do I do from here?
Yeah. So another, that is a good skill. Check the facts. And works really well because it's about bringing that awareness, right, to what's going on. And you're right, it is a little bit more of an advanced skill, but it doesn't mean that people can't learn it by any means. But if you think about that compared to name all the great things that are in here right now, that one's a little bit more like quick and dirty.
Yeah.
The other thing to do is to remember that when your mind starts to spiral about all the negative possibilities, there's positive possibilities too that you're not thinking about. And so
spiral upward.
So spiral up. And remember, it's true that negative thing might happen, but don't forget that there are positive things that might happen too. So think about some of those, because we tend to focus on the negative and avoiding that pain, but it can also be really great.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the spiraling upward. That may happen, but let's focus on like what could, and then it definitely like shifts and motivates me to like, okay, it's worth a shot. Like if I'm nervous about like launching something or something like that, then it's worth a shot.
Yep.
Because that could be really great and that could be really fun. And, the other piece is when you are spiraling downward, I was listening to someone the other day and she was just like, well, so what? Well, then this thing would happen. Like I wouldn't get the sale. Well, so, but then this wouldn't happen. Well, so, and just like not necessarily minimizing it, but being like, is that really
Well, and then that kind of like, and then what? And then what? And then what? Yeah.
So that's another thing that I like.
So trying to get past like the catastrophizing piece of it.
Yeah. What would you do if that happened?
Yeah.
You'd still be alive. You'd still be breathing. You'd have all the skills you have and all the capabilities. What would you do?
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like it sounds challenging in a sense, but it can also be empowering.
Well, I mean, I think we have this idea that challenging is bad, but challenging also helps to think about things in a new way and consider a perspective maybe that you haven't.
Yeah.
So it can be really valuable and useful. I think the other thing I want to talk about is the value of taking a break.
Yeah.
Stepping away from it. Going for a walk. Playing with your dog. Going to the break room. Getting some water.
Yeah.
Go getting a cup of coffee. Like, I think so often taking a break just either slips to the bottom of our to-do list or off our to-do list. And we really know that we need time to process. We need time to think about things.
Yes.
Like that's when we're going to be our most creative selves. It's not when we've worked 12 hours on the same project. It's when we finally like have enough like sense to step away from it and take a break, even if it's overnight for an hour. Like, I know this might seem like a weird example, but I remember working on my dissertation and I distinctly remember like sitting there in your house and I got to this point where I was just like, I can't think of anything else. I'm totally frozen. I had been staring at the screen for like 8 hours and I had like an emotional breakdown because I just couldn't think anymore and I was frozen and you were like, okay, shut your computer. I'm like, no. I'm like, I can't. And you're like, no.
You're not doing anything right now anyway.
You're not doing anything productive right now. So just shut it and walk away. So I stepped away from it, right? And the next day, I stepped away from it for the rest of the night. And then the next day, I looked at it again and I was like, oh. And I saw something and made a connection that I didn't see before and I was able to finish up.
Yeah.
So, I think that sometimes we don't value those breaks enough. Yeah. Like we just get this kind of obsessive idea that if we just keep at it, like breakthrough will happen.
No. Yeah.
But even like if you think about adrenal glands and like hormones and all of that, like our stress system just needs a break sometimes.
Yeah. Well, there's the whole idea of like overactive adrenals or like adrenal fatigue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean... So schedule breaks. The world won't end if you take 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It just won't.
I mean, on that note,
let's take a break.
That'd be a really great segue if we had more to say about this.
Well, I really hope that these things were helpful, right? Yeah. And like, don't get the idea that like we all have anxieties. Like
and no one knows what the fuck's going on.
No, everybody's just doing their best. So stop trying to strive so much for perfection. Live in that kind of grounded moments a little bit more and not so much out in the future. And
if you're going to spiral upward.
Spiral upward.
All right, guys, we will talk to you later. And don't forget, next week's episode is super special. So definitely
check it out. Yep.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye, friends.
Bye. All right, that wraps up another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and if you want to keep up with all of my fun day-to-day shenanigans, then go ahead and follow me across all the social media. I am at DezWMsMBA, so DezWMsMBA. I'm talking Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm everywhere. My Insta stories are so good. Also, if you like what we're doing, if you're kind of mediocre about what we're doing, any of that stuff, please leave a review, share it with someone. If you don't like us, but maybe you know someone that may like us, share it with them. Leave a review, comment, all that fun stuff on iTunes. And also, I would like to thank Forget the Whale for use of their song Move Along as our theme music. And if you haven't already, then go to DesireeW.com, find your legendary leadership style, and let me know what it is, because I'm dying to know. And remember to stay unavailable for fuckery.